Catherine Kish, and I'm a longtime member of the Princeton Future board. We don't really call it a board, but that's what we are. And I'm also executive director of Einstein's Alley. And you may have seen our signs around and about, but Einstein's Alley is all about attracting and keeping entrepreneurs in New Jersey who will build wonderful businesses here. And one of the important things that we work on is the fact that people who are in the field of technology tend to like to have wonderful places to live and educate their children. So livable communities and sustainable development are all a part of my work. And it's the kind of work that we're doing today. And thank you again for being brave people and coming out. I really want to thank our partners, the library, and God bless Kim Dorman, who's out putting out chairs right now. But the library has been wonderful, and they've been wonderful to host our meetings and help us plan our meetings. So that's really important. I also want to thank all the people who have contributed their input, and many of you have been those people at previous meetings where we've had drawing paper on the maps out, and people have marked up their ideas about where the town could grow. And that's an important part. It's really the basis of the work that Tony has done, that he's going to show us today. There are also going to be, just so you know, this is a big presentation, but there are going to be lots of places. I keep forgetting. I keep thinking my voice carries, I apologize. There are going to be lots of places during the program where we will stop and you will participate, I hope. We have lots of places for a response. We're going to talk about whether you like the ideas, whether you don't like the ideas, whether you have new ideas that should be considered. And we really, the whole thing about Princeton Future is listening to what people care about. It's about conversations. It's about creating a real understanding of what things are going to be in the future, because you have a choice and you have input. So we're going to have lots of breaks in the program. Just don't worry about that. And just so you know, in order for us to get as wide a distribution about these programs as possible, we produce a book. Sheldon, can you hold up one of the books? Do you have a book back there?
I don't have one.
Oh,
Online, though.
Okay, they are online. We produce these comprehensive books, and they are on file at the library. You can take them out at the library. You can look at them online, or you can order one for your very own copy. I would now like to introduce Tony Nellison, who's an amazing professional who's giving prodigious amounts of time and his talent as a volunteer for this community. He's been teaching urban design and had professional practice first at Harvard and then at Rutgers for the past 39 years. He's one of the nation's most respected urban visionaries. With more than 40 years of professional experience as a professor, an author, and a practitioner in the fields of visioning, planning, and urban design throughout the world, we are so lucky to have his perspective on this topic. So, Tony, thank you very much. And I may have lost the slide that says extended, but it doesn't
That's
matter.
all right. Well, I think, good morning, everybody. Catherine has just gone through the extended thanks, so I'm just going to jump right into it. This particular production you're going to see this morning is a result of maybe 2,000 to 3,000 hours of volunteer time. And what we did is we did a series of 21 workshops across the board, and those particular results are going to be condensed now down into hopefully about 2 hours. So I'm not going to be able to cover certainly everything that was done, but I will try to skim the most important ones to be able to get your response back. Now, what came out of all of this work was essentially 4 planning policies. The first one, which came out of one of the last workshops we did, is called the Emerald Necklace. The second one is called the Golden Circle. The third one is called the Silver Lining, and the fourth one is called Leafy Suburbia. These four policies are clearly the generation of what you thought, the people who participated, thought should happen. Now, we got this question very early on. Why is Princeton Future doing this? I mean, why are you doing this when the town is spending $250,000, $300,000, not clear at this point, doing a master plan? Well, Princeton Future's been around for a while, and it's really because I think the people who are involved with this and the people who participated, the hundreds and hundreds of people who participated, really love and care about the town. And we really believe in ongoing public interaction. I mean, this town is just wonderful in terms of its interaction, and what we call it is participatory democracy. It's not a dictatorship. This is participatory democracy. So what you're going to see is not our recommendation. What it is, it's a synthesis of all of your recommendations. The third one is we believe that we were complementing the work of the Princeton Planning Board and the new master plan. I wish I could say that was true, but unfortunately the legal people, as I understand, did not allow anyone from the Princeton Planning Board or the executive committee to interact with us at all. So these have been two completely separate courses, of which we are obviously quite sad, but that's the way it is. The other thing that's really important is we believe in it, and you believe that this holistic notion of you got to tie mobility, land use, open space, housing affordability, all can be developed through this conversation. And you're going to see it. It's just quite remarkable what has happened. Every one of the workshops that was done had some component of affordability in it, had some component of mobility, whether that's pedestrian, bike, or you'll see some of the other ones. And of course, I firmly believe that planning must be more than policy. Now, I taught planning now for both at Harvard, Rutgers, and God knows how many other universities for 56 years, or 54 years. And I really believe it has to be three-dimensional. And the problem with most zoning and what have you is that it's words. It's words. And I think words need to be translated into actual vision. And one of the things that became very important that you'll see as the basis and one of the very first workshops of the last that were done is this notion of land that is susceptible to change. And not, again, not our recommendation. These were a group of people, and I will show that. And what we think is important, that if you find out that people tell you what's susceptible to change, and then you take the time to listen to what they think should happen on those particular pieces of land, and then you take the time to try to translate their visions into some preliminary sketch, you got some idea of what it is that the people actually want, as opposed to words like, we want Princeton to be a nice town, or whatever that goes on. Now, I am going to focus on a bit of planning which has been universally, I think, at this point accepted worldwide. And what it is, it's come out of the Congress for Urbanism, which I think there are probably several members of Congress for Urbanism who are here today, that believed in what we call the transect, which means that you divide land into essentially 7 zones or 7 pieces. And they go from T1, which is the Emerald Necklace, that is, you never build on this land. T2, you reserve it. T3, which is the majority of town, which is suburbia. And then it moves further up the line as things become more dense as you get closer to the center, which is T6. And then you have the special district, which are the universities. All of these would completely apply to Princeton and could all be done with GIS systems with no problem, and I hope that's what Clark Heaton and Kids is actually going to be doing. Now, we wanted your opinion. That was really the key factor, and it's a factor in all of the work, essentially, that I have ever done. Now, one of the things that I have shown people forever and ever and ever is this simple diagram. And it is a diagram that says things are formed, they grow, they optimize, they deteriorate, they redevelop, they grow, they optimize. And they optimize based on technology, they based on social structure, they based on media, they based on financing, what have you. But it's never obviously that simple. When we actually plot this across, I can't tell you, 400 or 500 cities that we have done, it's never nice and clean. It's always lopsided. things optimize in bigger areas and they deteriorate faster in other areas. In some places, they don't go at all. Now, what's interesting about this one, just going back, is that we're born, just think about it, we're in the middle, we're born, we grow, we optimize, and then we try to stay alive as long as conceivably possible with as much technology as we can possibly put into ourselves, and then we die. But towns and cities don't do that. They continue. They continue to grow and evolve and change over time. Now, in the summer, I spent 6 months abroad. Francoise and I have a house in southwest France. And I got an opportunity to read this book by David Reich, which kind of blew me away. I mean, I had no idea how humans have gone through such an extraordinary evolution over time. Through the now ability to be able to look at DNA. Nothing ever remains the same. Nothing remains the same. Everything is evolving at some rate all the time, forever, which I thought was really, really extraordinary. Now, let me give you an example of that. This is a glorious photograph of Princeton in its heyday, supposedly in its heyday, right? We're looking at here, what, 1910. And I always found really fascinating looking at this. There's so much urban design to be learned from this particular diagram, but there's also a lot of historic evolution in here. Whereas here we had, trucks that backed up and sold produce onto the wide sidewalks, a diagonal parking down the street. But of course, the traffic engineers took care of all of that as we continued to widen and we became more autocentric. Now, what happened over time? Just look at this little simulation over time. Only 2 of the buildings on the left-hand side remain the same. Interestingly enough, the ones on the right-hand side have stayed pretty much similar. The university has kind of kept that kind of edge. But what I find really fascinating, and one of the areas that we're going to focus on is going to be the Princeton Shopping Center. I used to work for Victor Groen. I got hired by Victor Groen right after I got out of college, and I used to design shopping centers. And I could design a shopping center in 20 minutes. It's just a piece of cake, right? But an early Type 1 shopping center was the Princeton Shopping Center, with the kind of courtyard thing in the middle. It was constructed in 1954 as a regional shopping center that had a Bamberger's and 2 supermarkets. And we know everything, as I said, changes, and certainly this one has changed and is continuing to change at a rapid rate right now, given the fact that there is, and also here, this urban evolution over time is interesting. Look at Palmer Square, 1939, 1942, finished. And then, there's some really unfortunate things that still hang out. This is the Paul Robeson place. But look at the plaza in front. This was a parking lot. This was a parking lot. And this was a building that torn down. It's in my backyard. And it's going to become this. Things are constantly changing, as is our beloved Witherspoon Street, which got transferred to this now that it's finished. I did an early visioning process with Witherspoon Jackson, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the most negative images in the place was the Paul Robeson place. It was the Paul Robeson house. Look what's happening to that. So it is inevitable that things are going to continue to improve and change. Now, as I said earlier, we did 21 public sessions. And again, I can only focus on the last 6. But Sheldon Sturgis and his group have just been extraordinary in terms of getting public input on it. So let's focus on the last 6. Now, this one, which I found was fascinating, is almost the last one we did. And that last one, this whole group of people from town got up here in this room and said, this is the area that we want to see preserved. We want to see these areas of green space preserved now and forever with no development on them in the conceivable future. And we can argue that certainly should be policy number 1. The policy number 1 clearly says preserve the existing fields and forests, no development needed now or ever. Now, what that does, it says here is the application of what we call the T1 and T2 land use transects. That just with a simple GIS system, which I'm sure Clark, Hayton, and Clintz have, they could identify every one of these areas and simply stamp it out as a T1, T2. T1 is never to be built on, and the other one, if you want some slippage in it, it's areas to be reserved only until everything else is built out, and then maybe we'll think about that. But what is really graphically fantastic about it is that this necklace, it does actually form a necklace around the town. And it seems to me that by forming this kind of green necklace or green belt, however you want to say around the town, it provides not only a sense of enclosure for the town, but also provides the ability to move out from the town into the green space, and then, of course, connecting those green spaces together would obviously be one of the things we want to think seriously about. Now, the second policy is, you can see the big green area here, that also contains the necklace, but just looking at it, it becomes policy number 2 that people have told us, and that is maintain and enhance the suburban areas of the town. There's very little needs to be done out there other than perhaps tweaking of the existing zoning in some form or another, but to allow, that people have told us over and over and over again, if you've got a big lot and you've got a 40 by 40 piece of land in your backyard, you should be allowed to build an accessory dwelling unit for your kids or your grandparents or your father or your mother who wants to live with you or on that lot. That should be able to be possible. But that is a little bit more intense and should be zoned, obviously, what we call the T3 and T4 areas, which is planning policy number 2, to maintain the existing suburban areas of the town. Now, what's interesting about it is that policy 3 actually came out of the first set of the 6 meetings, the first 2. And I would probably think that this was probably, in addition to the green space around town, this one probably became the most important because it became the fundamental basis by which everything else that was recommended was essentially based. And it said, determine land, lots, and buildings that are susceptible to change between 1 and 15 years from now. Now, we didn't do that. We did it with a wonderful set of people who participated, and we call this, those areas in Princeton most susceptible to change are not something to be frightened of, but they're areas of opportunity because the town has some other issues, which I'll get to. We focused only on 7 areas, just 7 areas of town, and here's just 2 photographs. And I think Lance, the videographer, has the meetings, a complete video of those meetings. It was an intense set of meetings where people went from table to table to table, telling us where they thought the lands in these, this small area, which you can see coming up, that small area, was susceptible to change. Now, that's what those areas kind of look like. That's the hole in the donut, if you will. Now, what's interesting about it is this is only 17% of the town. That's 17% of the town, and of that 17%, probably maybe 5% of that area is actually the areas which are considered to be susceptible to change. Now, what's always very interesting about that is that you've got the 7 focus areas which were decided on, and that took some time to think about doing that in terms of where people seem to be moving with certain areas, where there seemed to be interest, where there seemed to be focusing on potential development. And so what we did with this one is said, okay, let's just, and each of these was a separate map. These were all laid on tables, 7 different tables, and people went around from table to table until we had all of it done, and then we spent 3 weeks synthesizing all that data into one series of 7 maps. Now, what were those criteria we said to people? What are areas susceptible to change? And this is just a guide. You tell us, but here's the guide. 1, any surface parking lot. Surface parking lots are the land banks of the future. We must, and that's pretty clear, as you can see in this town, right now at the window, we used to be a parking lot. There used to be parking, every surface parking lot will be eliminated in urban areas. It's a ridiculous and useless, except for the suburbanites coming in and a need to park, which is another whole issue. The second was 1-story buildings. 1-story buildings. The third one was high land improvement ratio. That one may be a little difficult. What it means is the land is more valuable than the buildings that are on it by a huge factor in some cases. The land here is just extraordinarily valuable in certain areas. Underutilization, lack of maintenance, and that is fairly clear in certain areas of the town. Absentee landlords, availability or potential adjacent to parking, currently not at the allowable height, potential for public-private joint ventures, owner agreement, desire, areas of infrastructure more than 50 years old, which is an area of rehabilitation, and then within 5 to 10 minute walk of a focus of activity or transit stop, which means we're really trying to focus the development into specific areas. But we had no idea what we would actually find until the workshops were done. Now here's what people had 4 colors on these maps. The first one is green, color it green on the map if you don't think any change should happen whatsoever. Color it yellow if you think maybe a little neat little painting or what have you. Interestingly enough, no one used the green or the yellow. It was just left. What they focused on, and the only 2 colors that they actually used, were moderate susceptibility to change and high susceptibility to change. So what you're going to see in the following maps, the 7 maps that were synthesized, is those, essentially only those 2 colors, because everything else is going to remain as is. So here's a typical example of just one of those 7 maps. Now, and we asked people in the first workshop to just suggest to us where those areas of susceptibility would occur. Now, you can see North Harrison is at the bottom, and the choir college is up on the top. But notice what they did at the choir college is that they left the front of it as moderate susceptibility to change, but the back part, which is all the parking lots and what have you, is highly susceptible to change. Now again, this is not something that we did. This is something that was synthesized from all of the work that was done by every one of the groups. That was the first meeting. The second meeting then said, what do you think should happen here? And in the process of doing that, you see that on the side. So they came up with all of these suggestions as to what should actually happen in those areas which are either moderate or heavily susceptible to change. And this was done for all of those 7 areas. Now, the Planning Policy 4, which came out of the 3rd and 4th meeting, is probably, to me, one of the more important because it's one that's nearest and dearest to everybody's heart. And that is adopt multiple parking and mobility options. I mean, there's a traffic problem and there's a parking problem. And there has been a traffic and a parking problem in this town forever and ever and ever, and there's only continued to be that unless we do something about it. But the key factor is that people wanted to make the town more walkable. Make the town more walkable. Now remember, you've got the golden, the emerald necklace that kind of confines it to an area. And then how inside that particular area do you make it more walkable and less car-centric? Now, what came out of that was traffic calming. You'll see some recommendations of traffic calming. Heavy-duty emphasis on more pedestrian, transit, and bike priority. And again, all of those have been things that have been talked about a lot in this town, but were reiterated in the workshops that we did. This one I thought was fascinating. Every one of these, in fact, it's just fantastic. Have people not as somebody saying, hey, you got to do this, but somebody who would just ask them, where do you think there are dangerous intersections? And you can see here the heavy-duty X's are where people thought that there was a problem, and there was 2 types. It was a primary and a secondary one. The big ones, as you can see, is the one when Bayard Lane meets Route 1. I mean the turn in the corner. That's certainly one, and the one out on 206. And those were the 2 big ones. And then there was one that was actually by the shopping center. Now, what did they want for those particular areas? They came along and said they recommend in the big X's that we institute traffic circles. We just came from France, and there's a gazillion traffic rond-point in France. I mean, every 3rd mile seems to be a rond-point. They work really well because there's no traffic lights anymore, and the traffic flows. And I thought that was interesting. The others is just to improve the pedestrian crossings, and you're going to see how that works out. Another map that was done in that workshop was, where do you think future parking should go? Now, we're talking about not surface parking, but we're talking about mixed-use parking. Retail below, parking, housing, or some combination of the 2. But the big ones, if you look at where the biggest numbers of parking decks went, it was at the Princeton Shopping Center and at the Civic Center, which is down on the end of Witherspoon Street. And you can see other ones around town, and one of them that you're going to see is going to be the Park Place one, and I'll go into that a little bit. Now, this is the golden ring. And to me, it just was amazing to me that when you ask, listen, transit is thinking about extending the transit line from the station into town. Where do you think that line should actually go? And this was the results, that it should come up University Place, go down Nassau Street, go up Harrison Street, and then down and around, and then connect back to the train station again. And they also said they didn't want the big Beamont buses. What they were really looking for, in terms of giving them choices of several different bus types, this is the one that came up, this one absolutely came up the highest. Easy to get on, easy to get off, side-loaded, and electric, hopefully, electric. They're all over Europe at this point, and maybe you got to buy them from Europe, I'm not really sure. And then, of course, as you know, the university is just in the way the university is doing everything correctly. Got rid of all those big Beamont buses and went with smaller electric buses. And so, you know, there certainly has been movement on that. The question is that the university now has all of its stuff correctly. The question now is, can the town get its movement system correct? Now, the two factors that were really important on this one was obviously the 5-minute walk and the 10-minute walk. And the key factor is that if I mean, Princeton is already a pretty incredible place, but could you imagine if this system was in place and people could actually walk to transit? Kids could take the transit bus to all the school systems that are in town. You could take it to recreation facilities, and this thing would run every 10 minutes in both directions, so that you just had to go and then be there. And 5 minutes is really the key, and it's 5 minutes where most people had recommended we concentrate as much development as conceivably possible within that 5-minute areas. But then the new technology, the new research is indicating that people are willing to walk more. If you've got a cool place to walk, nice sidewalk, flowers, what have you, people will actually walk more. They'll walk up to 10 minutes. Now, 5 minutes is about 1,500 feet, 10 minutes is about 3,000 feet. And of course, the more we walk, the healthier we feel, the longer we live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then of course there's the bicycle issue, but this is primarily focused on walking. So the key factor here is, if we have the big ring, the golden necklace, and you have the golden ring of the transit system, and within that you isolate a series of these stops, and you zone it to be able to allow this housing, mixed-use, retail, open space to occur, you have the best of all possible plans. Now, this is going to be the deal. How in the world, I mean, look at this. This is downtown. Massive cars, one person in it. Massive cars, one person in it. What happens is we have become an auto-centric town. The question is, where do you park? And how do you begin to deal with that? And perhaps in the suburban areas, which are going to remain auto-centric, that's okay. With their 3-car garages or 2-car garages, doesn't make a difference. But the center of town could be this absolutely incredible, sustainable, walkable transit facility, and then you absorb the parking as it comes in without essentially allowing it to overrun the actual downtown area itself. Now, what I find in terms of the policies, and this is the one that probably most of you have heard about, is this presentation, is provide for market rate and affordable housing. Now, the meeting we had here focused on what was called make it livable and lovable. Provide the middle housing type. I mean, I just got back from Europe. We're thinking, and we have, houses there are at the most expensive, maybe $250,000, $300,000. And I walked out to top Nassau Street, because I live on Bank Street, and looked at what was in the window, and the prices of the house average that were for sale in the window were $1,600,000, $1,700,000, $2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million. And I'm going like, my God, I'm a teacher, I'm somebody making 60, 70, 80, 90,000 a year. Where in the hell do I live in this town? Well, you don't. So the question is, if you could make it livable and lovable, which, by the way, most people thought you could do that, and you focus on transit, but the other question is you prioritize downtown. Don't prioritize suburbia, prioritize downtown. Let downtown become a place that should be able to absorb it. Now, here's some of the reality. The town has a fair share obligation. Now, the last time I was told from research that after they got their last fair share analysis, the town said, oh no, we're not accepting this, and they spent, someplace, the rumor is, between $1.5 and $2 million on legal fees to stop it. Well, they lost. They lost. You're not gonna beat this one. You have to learn to provide it. So Princeton had a need at that point of 933 units, of which already, and much to the credit of the town, 753, as when I left, 523, were actually being built. And you know, I mean, and it's some really interesting things that are being done, but the current need is still that 180 units that need to be provided someplace. And then, here is the big question. What will be in 2025? We get another number. Town gets another number. We estimated low at 500. If we got a number of 500, how could we accommodate that? Could we accommodate that? It may be, I suspect it's going to be higher, but let's just say it's 500. So what we need is 680 units someplace. And you can see the beginnings of the idea is to focus it as much as we can into that 17% of the town. Now, the law says Princeton must have zoning in place that creates a realistic opportunity for the assigned units to be built. But you have to build them. You have to have the zoning in place to have the realistic opportunity for them to be built. Now, certainly there is some zoning out there for certain areas right now, but the question is that appropriate? And the other question is, you must have enough multifamily housing to be able to subsidize the market rate at roughly about 20%, although, thank goodness, let's say the Franklin Avenue one is actually going to go 50-50, which means that it's somewhat lower. Now, here's the simple diagram we started out on. These are all of the workshops: susceptibility, change, mobility, affordable housing, preserving open space. Then, this was the first planning, and I'm going to begin now showing you what I call doodles. These are sketches of what I thought people told us they wanted in these areas susceptible to change. Now, this is today's meeting. Today's meeting is really about, how, I'd like to get your input on these because they've only been seen by maybe 20 or 25 or 30 people over a particular period of time. And then, we have the master plan, which is in the process, and at noon today there's another master plan meeting. And then I really think that in order to really make this work, it has to go into some level of schematic design, and then it needs to be what I call rezoning overlays, and then the overlays would simply be adopted. And I have a personal bias that I think it should be a form-based code and not a Euclidean code, not just words, but really needs to be diagrams and sketches to make it understandable to most people. Because quite honestly, 95% of the people cannot read the zoning ordinance. I mean, that's why the lawyers have you by the you-know-what. Because only they think they can read it, and in many cases, they're the people who actually do some of the writing of it. And they're arrogant, and they're untrained. Now, I have been teaching for 56 years, and I will tell you, just give you one simple example. Rutgers University typically takes in 80 top grade master's students a year for the Masters of City and Regional Planning. Of those 80 students, maybe 6 to 10 can draw. The rest of them are all words, policies, indictments, legal battles. They can't draw. Now you kind of wonder why so much of the stuff out there is so terrible. It's because they were never really figured out what it actually would look like before they wrote the zoning codes. So that has really been a thing of mine, and I will admit that those students of mine over the years, both at Harvard and Rutgers, and I think I saw Jim Constantine here, who's probably one of the preeminent planners. That Jim went through all my courses, and he has all that ability, and he certainly has shown it across the board in the work that he's done. But it's not only the planners, but then the lawyers think they know how to draw, and that's the worst, because they have no training whatsoever. So that's my expose on that one. Now, clearly, when we talk about the doodles, and you're going to see a bunch of these doodles, What do they contain? I tried to take everything that people told me and tried to synthesize that into a series of these sketches. So one, it's housing. Two, it's accessory dwelling units, retail, commercial, and shared workspace. Seems to be a big thing that people want. How do you get shared workspace around these things? Green spaces, public plazas, streetscape, and even green roofs came up as really high. And then there were things like child and elderly care. I mean, look at the gray hair in this room. I mean, I'm 81. You know, I would love a transit stop and somebody to take care of me in a few years from now. You know, wider pedestrian accommodated sidewalks, bike path, benches and trash containers, lighting, and a neighborhood information board. These are the things people told me. We're going to do a transit stop. This is what I would like to see at these particular areas. Now, the thing is, I would love to show you everything we did, but there's no way to do that. I mean, it's just too much. Catherine has looked at this and other people going like, Tony, you're just overloading people. But I'm going to present what I can present to you today to give you an idea about what happened. Now, the key factor to most of this stuff, and as you probably surmise from now, I essentially, and the board focused primarily on that 5-minute walking distance around those 12 stations. That's where we're going to focus it. We're not going to focus on suburbia. We're not going to touch the emerald necklace. We're going to focus on those particular areas. And probably one of the biggest one is the number one stop, which is downtown. Now, what's fascinating about it is that there's a duality going on in this town, and as you probably know, it's been going on for a number of years. One, you've got the downtown, and secondly, you got the emerging regional shopping center. Now, how in the world a regional shopping center ever got built in Princeton is completely beyond me, because it should have been out on Route 1 as opposed to where it is on North Harrison Street. But at that point, you know, nobody cared in 1954. They just thought downtown was deteriorating, so let's build something that will compete with the downtown. And that has happened since 1954, and it's happening again right now. So the connection between downtown and the shopping center is one of the things that are going to be critical as a connection between the two. But let's focus just on the downtown for the time being. This is going to be the highest intensity areas in town. But then when we looked at it, here's was the susceptibility to change map, and everything is on here. As you can see, there's lots of little spots of red. I mean, little spots of red. People were really nitpicky, like, this piece, that piece, the other piece. But one of the things that was most interesting, I thought, was that they thought there should be an overlay on the entire town that moved it from a floor area ratio, which means, I think it's 1.5 to 3 or 4. Now, let me give you an example of that. When the hotel, which is in my backyard, 4 feet from my backyard, you know, and we spend a lot of time with the zoning board, and the poor zoning board in this town, I really feel sorry for them because the stuff is so obsolete, the zoning is so obsolete, that they it's a floor area ratio of 4, and they had to get a variance on that. Because the town has only got a 1.5 variance ratio, which means that if you've got, let's say you got a floor area ratio of 2, which means that your lot area is a certain area, and you can build 2 times that lot area on top of that land. That's simply kind of what it means. And you can cut pieces out and what have you. But what this was, to me, was really fascinating. And you can see there that walk distance. So there's a good amount of the town falls within that particular transit stop. Now, thanks to Josh Zindler, who I just took this from his testimony, which he did for the hotel, which is the one next to the R4 area on the left-hand side. You can see all of those areas in white, which are essentially one-story buildings. Those are all prime. They're all prime for redoing or what have you, or maybe people don't want to invest, or maybe they do want to invest, but there's really opportunities there. And you can see the tallest building in town is the building right out there, right outside the building. That's got an FAR of 4. So this said, bring it out to somewhat lower to keep kind of the scale, kind of an intimate, keep it as kind of an intimate scale. Now, I'm going to start with my first doodle. I'm going to do all the downtown stuff at one time. And now a doodle for me is you tell me I think we should have a transit stop here, or I think we should have a bus stop. I can just quickly do a doodle. I was taught that in Minnesota, and I've done that all my life, although it's becoming obsolete soon because AI will take it all over. But let me just show you this one, which I think was really pretty interesting. Now, this is the yellow thing here is the Chambers Street parking deck. Now, quite honestly, when I first moved here 40 years ago, it costs me, I don't know, $25 a month to park in the parking deck. It now costs me $280 a month to park in the parking deck. And that parking deck lease is coming up. So this thing is it's owned by the town, the lease will be up, and it's an area that people thought could be redone in some form or another. So here's the first thought that we had on it, or I had on it from all that. They said, we'll do something with that parking deck because it could be bigger, but it needs more parking spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So here was the first thought on this thing. And these are standard, you can see a standard 60-foot wide buildings, double loaded corridor, 60-foot wide, standard, being built all over the world. But then there's optional buildings. There's it's a one-story building, used to be a bank, and it's been empty for years, and so they could or could not be included in this plan. But here's what, if you cut a section through it, which means like it's like a bridge, you cut the section right straight through the building, this is what it could look like. And you can see Chambers Street lot there, which means you go below ground for a couple stories, and then you go up. So you got a whole number of parking spaces. And then on the side, if I could follow through on this one, these are what's called liner buildings, which means you never see the parking deck, which means that the corridor goes down the side so the parking stays in the middle. Now, a very good example of that is right outside the door here, where they built a parking deck, but then they built a building in front of the parking deck so you couldn't see the parking deck. And this has been a policy across the board because people find surface parking lots are the most negative and the most unacceptable, but then a surface parking, a deck parking lot with exposed parking is the next ugliest thing out there. So this one you want to do liner buildings against the side. So here now, typically I will take these things and it's super easy to do. Every one of my students knows how to do this in their sleep. You pop it up in 3 dimensions. You do axiometrics. And say, okay, here's what the thing could actually look like in an axiometric form. But then let's add the green roofs and the landscaping to it. Wow, you mean you could have a parking deck and on top of the parking deck could be a swimming pool and a park? And you could look down in the interior onto an interior park, and you could look down on the outside of it into an improved Chambers Street. Wouldn't that be the coolest thing going? So then what you do is you just start with stuff very simple. You start out with just blocking out the building. Okay, let's see what, and you can see here, the way it's done here is the old thing is in the background. So you just put it in the background, lighten it up and just sketch over top of it and say, well, let's start adding a little facade and see what the facade might kind of look like. And then let's add some more facade to it, and let's see what the thing would look like. And then let's add some landscaping, and let's see what the final product might look like. Now, this is just a sketch, or a doodle. This is not AI. If I put this into AI, which I don't have time to do right now, I could show you 20 variations on this thing in a matter of 5 minutes. It says, import the sketch, draw it with all brick, draw it all glass, draw it all green. And immediately it pops out all of these details. It's becoming revolutionary in terms of what's happening to our future. Now, for every one of these projects, I determine the total number of units and how much affordable units could happen within those particular units. And I did that for all of the sites. And this is how we not only achieve the future need, but in some cases we could exceed it, But if it goes above 500 units, we're short. But be that as it may. So there's a program done, and by the way, this is the AI thing, which is just revolutionizing everything at this stage. I mean, here you see there's a sketch to a drawing, and the sketch to a drawing, this could go from here. And here are just variations on it. And it takes seconds for the machines to do this now. So you could add any number of possible variations. I want it to look colonial. I want it to look modern. I want it to look green. And it would spit out these sets of alternatives. Now, that was the Chambers Street garage. Witherspoon to Lane parking lot. This one is really interesting, I think. This one came out super red, right? And as you know, at the bottom of this image is Witherspoon Street, and you know it's a big, ugly surface parking lot in the back of this thing. And I'm going, everybody put this thing as red. We got to do something about this. We got to do something about this place. Not only did that, but they also took the 2 little buildings which are next to it, the 1-story buildings, and they added them to the highly susceptible to change, which is perfectly understandable. Now this is what it looks like. I mean, it's got problems because people have been urinating back there, and it's falling apart, and it's just a few parking spots. Literally, it's just a few parking spots. Now, one of the early thoughts, this came from Sheldon at one point, and I said, let me just try it. He said, we got to get people used to walking in the back of these buildings. And I said, well, why don't we do like Boston did? Let's just put the yellow brick road, instead of the yellow brick road, let's put orange, it's university color. Let's just paint it on them and start getting people used to it, getting psychologically conditioned to the fact that you can actually walk back there. So this was this was the first. So this one is the Charles Schwab building, and I understand there's a plan, which I saw, which is a really terrible plan for that lot and those buildings. And so it was moderately susceptible to change, but it allows its floor area, which is now less than 1.5, to go high. What would that actually start to look like? So the first thing I did is, okay, we got to keep the Panera, we got to keep what I call the Panera building, because my office used to be there. But what happens if we actually blocked in a new building on top of that and set it back? What would it look like? And it'd be similar in some cases to the building you see right outside the door here. So that, again, is a program, total number of affordable units. And then this one is really fascinating. This was a Park Place, and there was a walked coffee that was there. The Christian Science folks and what have you are interested in developing that particular piece. So we thought, well, what would actually happen if you kind of build, maybe one is a 4-story, one is a 3-story building. You kind of block those in, what that might look like. But you got to keep the alley. You got to keep the alley in between it. So that might be a doodle that might happen. But on the back side, it's more interesting because you got this big, massive, non-interconnected parking lots. Now, what would happen? Just imagine what would happen if indeed you left, the houses that are there, but you infilled everything that's open with a series of really beautiful, almost saying Dutch-inspired townhouses. And in the back, you built a parking structure, partially in the ground, partially above ground, because the site is sloped, with a big green roof on the top of it, and continue the pedestrian walkway along the back. So it continues in from the walkway, so you get this whole linear pedestrian thing, which begins to happen in the back end of Princeton, as well as what's on the existing street. And these are sort of like some ideas from the transit code that they might be able to look at. And of course, this one also has its own program. Now, you've just absorbed the downtown. This is stop 1. And we've got 12 stops to go, of which we're only going to focus on 4 more. So Catherine, if you want to take over here for a little bit, just to get your response to what you've seen and heard thus far.
Isn't this amazing work?
Yes. You see all this, and you just have to have some responses to it. So let's hear from you. What have you seen so far that is intriguing, scary, heaven knows what? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Andrew Thornton, and I'm work a lot on the Emerald Necklace.
The microphone just went out.
I can talk louder?
Yes.
No.
My name's Andrew Thornton, and I work on the Emerald Necklace for many years now. I've been building a number of nature trails around town, trying to connect existing trails, and I currently work up at Herrontown Woods as a groundskeeper and trail keeper up there. My question is, I'm trying to figure out how we design and continue this necklace. I see the one big question is, how do we get across Route 206? And do you have any plans or thoughts on how that would happen? Is it underpass, a pedestrian bridge over, lights?
I think, for me, typically, you do this in phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The overpass thing has never really worked. You got to go up, you got to go over, you got to come down, and most people don't do it. They want to go with their bicycles, they have to go up, they go over, down, so it doesn't really work. What really starts to work is the issue of allowing it to cross on grade, but with stops. So you have to have some kind of a stop that says you can stop in both directions. And the question is going to be, and you're going to see this more and more in the presentation, is that there's such an auto-centric notion that people are going, oh my God, you're going to stop one more time, the traffic's going to be backed up, it's going to be terrible, and you're going to hear that over and over again. Well, my notion is, listen, this is our town, this is our connection. If you're on Route 206 and you have to stop one more time, so be it. But it's got to be a beautiful crosswalk. stopped on both sides, and probably if it was me, I would paint it green. I would paint it green so you've got a green variation that goes across the top. And you know, the Europeans also have this great notion of the kind of the stop in the middle, the bulb with the black and white tube, with the tube on the top that flashes. It works every time. So that would be my recommendation. Also, if people's recommendation of the traffic circles, which I think are really critical, 2 of them on 206, it's going to, in some hands or another, allow the traffic to flow rather than stopping. And when it does stop, it backs up. And so when you get it, you get this gush, a wave of all these cars back to back to back to back to back, as opposed to the traffic circles, which allows them to flow freely. And it's probably easier for them then to absorb one stop for a pedestrian and bicycle.
I would also point you to one of our booklets. We had a meeting a while back, a few months ago, where all the open space people came and talked about what they were doing. We saw some very, very exciting projects. So if you would, go to our website or go to the library and look for the booklet on that meeting, and you'll hear lots of ideas. Other comments, other questions?
Okay, I'm gonna continue.
Wait, we've got some.
Okay.
Yes, Kathleen.
I just wanted to make the comment that I think these designs show that density is beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yay.
Good, yay. That came from the Princeton housing lady. Yes, a woman in the back.
My name is Dorothy Clone, and I live in across Route 206, which sometimes is like swimming across the Rio Grande or something, or traffic. And I appreciate all the plans that would be to restore some kind of traffic calming in that area. But I do believe there is something for us to be aware of. One of the houses that is at the foot of 206 as it makes the turn, I believe is owned by the university, and it seems to be falling into neglect. And many years ago I was on the traffic committee, and there was a plan at one point to eliminate that house, and there's only like 2 or 3 other houses that the university owns to complete 206 to join Alexander Road. So I've been watching this forever, feeling that that would be one of the plans, and I don't know if anybody has researched that.
Okay, if
No,
you're
but
with,
we'll definitely put it on the list.
if you're with the university, pay attention. Thank you.
Just one other thing, I want to congratulate you for so much for your idea for Witherspoon Street. It was a shame that they didn't make it be a street that could be closed often for functions, for Halloween, for everything. So everybody write a letter to the mayor and say what a great idea. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your
It is better, but
brilliant
it needs more
ideas.
work.
I
do you have
just want to
another?
note
Yeah, one second.
Yes.
momentarily, sorry.
I live in an adjacent town, and I'm interested in the intersection of urbanization and health and the needs of the elderly within your constructs. But I'm just curious, how do you lift a building in order to put parking under it? Or do you have to raise that whole building?
You can do either. You can do either. I've seen all types. Lift it up, dig it out, put the building back, or take the building and remove the building and put it someplace else, dig it out and then build up. The hotel is probably the most recent example in town, where they went down 30 feet into the ground for levels of parking underneath, and then build a building on top of it. So there's all sorts of ways to do that. It's typically more expensive to go underground than it is to go, certainly surface parking lots are the cheapest, that's why we have them. But the reality is that in the downtown area, the parking should be either in parking decks or should be submerged below ground.
We have lots more
I
interesting stuff.
just want to
Yes.
know, Princeton Future is a wonderful nonprofit, not necessarily the municipality, so we're hearing ideas, not necessarily what's had to happen to make changes.
Yes. We have one more
Just a comment about
comment.
affordable housing, a couple of comments. Number one, I think we already have on the board a complete response to our previous obligations. There are already plans for them, they're already happening. So I think we're fine with our obligations through 2025. In fact, I have a feeling that we've actually already okayed projects to go beyond that. On the other hand, my feeling is we still need a lot more affordable housing. And we need affordable housing that not only satisfies the state rules, but allows some Princeton preference, because We have people who've been forced out of Princeton at the bottom of the scale, a lot more than we're building at this point, and we really need to work on those, as well as people who are in the midst of the middle. I agree on that too. But the main thing we've done is force out the working class within Princeton, and we need to do everything we can to keep those people and to let some of them move back here. Thank you.
Great, we're going to have lots of time for questions at the very end, so let's hold future questions and we'll take from there going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do two more of these individual breaks before we get to the end. Okay, let me propose what I call the big test. This will test whether the municipality has the, you know what, to make some serious decisions relative to transportation and traffic. This will be interesting. One is the new graduate hotel. And one of the things that's really interesting is that, you know, most of you know I live on Bank Street. We've owned Bank Street, Francois and I have owned Bank Street now for, what, 40-some years? And we've always parked one of our cars, if we had two cars, in the parking deck. We still do, because sometimes you can't find parking in the street, so we pay the $280 a month to have access back to the parking deck. So I walk from Bank Street to the parking deck a lot, right? Now, one of the things that I find incredible is that they approved the hotel. I mean, not only did it encroach in my backyard, but that's neither here nor there. But one of the things that's interesting about it is that because I walk every day, or many times, to the parking deck, I have to go down Chambers Street. Now this is Chambers Street in the wintertime, right? You got this little 3-foot path. And that's a little closer look at it. Now, the main entrance to this hotel is on Chambers Street, right? And I'm going like, how in the world do you get from the university, which is probably one of the biggest clients, to that entrance in one direction, and how do you get it from the other direction? And then the third direction is how you flow through the parking deck. Now this is important because this is a continuation of that interior walkway in the other direction. So I think it needs a new crosswalk. And they go, oh no, we don't need a new crosswalk. We'll just wait and see. Well, it's not wait and see. Come on, let's plan ahead. So now it needs another crosswalk here. And it needs wider sidewalks. Clearly it needs wider sidewalks. But in order to get wider sidewalks, the town has to eliminate 5 parking spaces. Will it do it? This is the big test. Will it have the guts to say we're going to leave? And they have not been there for what, 2 years now. Nobody misses them. Nobody misses them. So eliminate the 5 parking spaces and widen the sidewalk. Now here's a doodle. That's the little narrow sidewalk. What would happen if we would just widen that sidewalk and take the parking out the other side? You can maybe widen the other one if you want, but just widen it to the point that you finally have got a decent access to the most expensive building in town. Or are they going to have people walk in the snow on that little 3-foot path, and will they take 5 parking spaces off of town? Now, any of you know, follow the work of Jan Gehl and people like that, is why Copenhagen is the town that it is. It's because Jan Gehl, every year for 20 years, took 5 or 6 parking spaces out of the downtown, and nobody ever misses it, and now it's considered to be the most walkable city in the world. And he's the #2 planner in the world, primarily. But will the town have the guts to do this? That will be the big test. If they do not do this, then there's lots of things that are going to fall after that, I suspect. But then here's another one. I find this absolutely extraordinary. This is a driveway for 1 car. 1 car. And he has access off of 206 to his garages. But his 1 car has this whole driveway. And it is the ugliest thing, particularly if you walk from my house down to the Y for exercise. You cannot walk on this side of the street. Now, what would happen, flipping in the other direction, if somehow or another the town again had the guts to say, listen, this is just ridiculous, that we actually did a double row of trees and we made a walkway that connected the Y to the hotel to the university all the way up and down that street. Well, wouldn't that be an interesting thing? We will see. Now, this one may be a little bit of a stretch for the town, but the first one, I think, is my test to whether or not the town has the balls, I'm sorry, to actually move ahead with this thing. Okay, now, I'm not going to do 2, we just don't have time to do 2, but I'm going to go to Jugtown, because that's a bit, it has some fascinating issues to it. That's stop number 3. Stop number 3 is really fascinating because it really encompasses a good portion of it. It's got the 5 and 10 minute walk. Within the 10-minute walk is the Butler track. People had some very interesting ideas about the Butler track and also some very interesting ideas about the Jugtown area. Now you can see the red part of it, that's really at the very right-hand side, is kind of the L shape. So the whole thing went highly susceptible to change from the Bank of America parking lot to the municipal, the old fire station. Now, I'm just going to focus at this point on the fire station, which is just right here. There's this little piece right here. Just this little piece to start off with. So we did this little piece and said, okay, what would happen on this little piece? So what do people want? So again, parking half level underground, which means that the buildings are raised roughly about 3 or 4 feet above the ground, and then you go 3 or 4 feet under the ground and you park under the building. And you have stoops and stairs in the front. That's really one of the key factors to safety. You do a double loaded corridor against the side. There's the little axiometric of what it could look like. That's a little bit of a detail of what it would actually look like. Kind of an H-shaped building with a kind of a porte cochere in the front of it. And then here's the doodle. So there's what it is now, a big, open, empty, ugly parking lot. And this is what it could be. I mean, it's just super, and again, you got a certain percentage of this with low and moderate, you got a certain percentage that could be elderly, and I think even more so elderly because you can have a drop-off directly in front, but also you have access to all these interesting shops and stores right in the back. I mean, Jugtown is a very interesting but very complex little corner. Okay, then there's a program for that one, okay? Now, if we consider all of stop 3, which is much more complicated, and say, hey, listen, what happens if we would actually develop the whole red piece, including the municipal parking lot, all the way up to the Bank of America building? 2 things became important. One, keep the existing buildings at the corner. We should really maintain the corner of the building. Don't do anything across the street. Just let that all alone. But leave the park in the corner. But the other question was, could you actually do a street section which looked like this, which means you pull retail up to the front of the street, you have housing above, and you have parking in the back, and all of them have green roofs. That's clear on all of the stuff. But then, if you did that, and you decided, or they decided, or whoever decided, that, listen, they were all going to get together and make a huge amount of money, and do the whole project at one crack, which could be interesting, but probably not very likely. And you created this kind of internal pedestrian walkways inside this. Again, that whole idea of making smaller, beautiful spaces. And maybe it's just something that has come out of seeing small, beautiful spaces. It would begin to look a bit like, that. And again, there's the program for the whole Jugtown. Butler. Wow, Butler was so interesting. People really got into Butler big time when we were doing the workshops. It's a big piece of land, but in order to be able to do it, there has to be some improvements to Harrison Street. Or else, you can see the little kind of orange dot that happens. The university bus may actually have to stop at that particular point, but there needs to be some improvement to be able to get Butler connected to the overall golden ring. Now here, going back to a drawing that you saw earlier, here's where the problem intersections were. Now, don't, I'm just going to focus on this one, right? So here's the thought. Okay, there you got it now, right? And it's a tough intersection, no doubt about that. But hey, what would happen if we said, okay, we're going to make this a barn walk? Let's just make this a barn walk. Okay, so then, of course, you got this issue again. Okay, we're all auto-oriented, we're all going to complain because we've got to stop some more, and we're in our big SUV with one person in it, and we got to stop some more, and I hate it, and I'm going to complain to Mia and the board and the traffic folks that this is a terrible thing because I have to wait too long in my car. Well, in the downtown, you're going to have to make these trade-offs. Is it car, or is it going to be more car, pedestrian, car, pedestrian? You have to make those to begin the decision. Now, the susceptibility to change, wow, all went red. Unbelievable amount of red. The whole site down there almost went completely red. I went, wow, really? But I knew the Butler track would go, but I didn't think the rest of it would go. But people had some fabulous ideas like eco-housing, solar panels, green roofs, orchards, gardens. But, okay, how do I translate that into something form? Now, one of the things, first of all, you can see, before that green arrow went in there, you can actually see the site. There's the Butler track there, right? The cool thing about the Butler track is that it already has a grid system in place. All the sewers and waters and stuff is in place. And it's got these 2 linear parks, literally on both sides of the plan. But, wow, what would happen, just as a hypothetical, if this linear park connected directly through to the university? One linear park connected directly through to the university. And, you know, now, you know, go, oh no, there's a house in the way. Well, you know, I know that, but be that as it may, it's just a thought, right? But now there was several. There's a site, and right now the site has got on-street parking on it, and I find in most cases people have told us eliminate that nasty on-street parking as much as possible. As much as possible. So of course, here is that little section I was talking about early on. And again, it's a little more expensive, but you see, you go partially underground, because you got to go underground anyway for frost. Raise the first level up above, have stoops and stairs in the front, and then, which we found, not only are units safer, but what happens is the people are more content and have worked really well with this semi-public space in front. So that should be in the codes. Now, this is a T5 transect. Again, I met with Anders Dorney a couple of weeks ago in France, and he's producing a new book on codes, which probably some of you know. And part of that thing is that that could happen here with not a problem whatsoever to translate this into a code. But now let me give you the idea of several alternatives were done, but this is the one that most people seem to have preferred. And that is, take the site, and you see the little red lines on here. Sorry, you see the little red lines on it coming in here. These are internal connections with each of these little kind of red dots in the middle being a kind of a neighborhood center. So create like 4 or 5 little neighborhood centers, but make the site really green, which means on the left-hand side, keep that as a garden, and on the other side, make it an orchard that continues on, so that the neighbors on both sides of it are completely buffered by green. And then the other question was, okay, what would these buildings start to look like? Well, here's a little axiometric, but the little axiometric, as you notice, has all green roofs on it and all solar panels on the roof. So the whole thing becomes an eco-based set of neighborhoods with a big public green in the middle and a garden on one side and an orchard on the other side. But notice down in Harrison Street, you can see a couple little red dots. They wanted some retail, a little bit of community, something or other. So here's the little doodle of that. One is that Harrison Street would need new street lights to be able to give it a connection. And then is there a possibility of cutting into the hill with putting a little bus stop right there with a little bit of retail, and you see the colored lines which are on the top of it filtered through this massive wall of existing trees. And that's the program, and it's a big program, so that's the program for that. Now I'm going to skip this one, Catherine, if you don't mind. I'm going to go directly. 4, we got a whole plan that was developed by folks for the choir college. We're not going to go into that. It's too much. But 5 is something I've got to talk to you guys about. People really focused a lot on the shopping center one, and a lot of work has been done on that shopping center. I mean, Jim is here. He's worked on it. Carlos Rodriguez has worked on it. My gosh, a lot of focus have gone on to that. And again, this is the duality in the town, that we've actually got 2 cores. We've got the shopping center core, and we've got the downtown core. And the question is the relationship between those two. Susceptibility to change came up extraordinarily high. The whole area around the shopping center became highly susceptible to change, including the Ellis site and the other site that RTTL is doing, and Thettet Drive. And Thettet Drive, as you know, is done now. I was there yesterday, and it's looking pretty amazing. Now, the market rate affordable housing is under construction, and I didn't take the upgraded photographs, but nonetheless, that's what it is, and it's fairly interesting and dense. And then, of course, the town has now got a plan, I think you all know, hired an engineer to be able to do a study of Harrison Street. It bothers me that it's an engineering firm as opposed to a landscape architecture firm. But be that as it may, that's being in the process of being done. As you know, this thing has gone through tremendous changes over time. And what has been sort of interesting, I think it's got the largest potential change. And of course, there's an area of needed redevelopment, which is already done. And RTPL has got this under construction already, and they have followed a really cool model to be able to make that happen. And that is that they have embedded the parking with a liner building on the outside, so you're not going to see the parking. So the parking is embedded, and then the liner buildings on the other side of it then overlook the baseball fields, which is really kind of a cool and kind of an interesting idea. I'm not very happy with where the Walgreens is and what that means, but be that as it may, that's not my responsibility, or nor should I be concerned about it. So anyway, when you pop this stuff up in 3 dimensions, that's kind of what it's going to look like. It's probably not exactly what it'll look like, but it's close enough. Again, everything gets pushed up in axiometrics, and that's the program for it. But it looks like this, and it's a bit modern, and it looks a little bit like the Alice as well. So it's starting to develop its own kind of vernacular over a particular basis of time. And of course, then you've got the Alice, which is actually on the other side of here, and that's under construction now, as you know. And that plan looks like this. Now, this is the McCaffrey's is here. This is the big parking lot that's only partially full. And then the unfortunate thing is that this is all parking. All parking. There's a dog park here, but they made an interesting connection between Thunnett Drive so that you can get from Thunnett Drive to the actual shopping center, although it is what it is. Now, the question is, and this one was done really early, you've got the old rescue center sitting there with 2 houses. What could happen to that place? So we looked at several variations on that came out of the workshops and said, listen, again, this is kind of the standard 3-story kind of housing. It's not modern. In some cases, it's really a thought that perhaps this should be more traditional and let the stuff around the shopping center be the ultra-modern pieces. But also, what would happen if the center island disappeared and bigger bike lanes were actually put down? And we'll have to see what happens with what the engineering firm actually comes up with over a period of time. So there's the program for the old rescue squad building. And then if you look at this, and again, people are really smart town here. This was done at the early workshops. Notice where the big bulk of parking is. The big bulk of parking is around the shopping center, and it's over at the civic center. 2 areas that could be intercept parking. Can you imagine coming in, if you really need to come, you come in and intercept parking, you park your car, and 2 minutes later there's a bus that takes you any place around downtown you want to go. It would be incredible. Now, the concept diagrams, and again, you know, one can't help but doing it. They said the whole thing's got to be developed. And of course, one of the things that people had said to us early on is that they wanted to keep that big center green thing. Okay, that's a 1954 concept. Let's keep the big center green thing. And as you know, there's a kind of beginning of a cross-axis there. Not complete, but there's no cross-axis, which could actually get you from Harrison Street, bus stop, to the parks in the back, and create a pedestrian promenade through the middle of a potentially future shopping center area, or it's not a shopping center anymore, it'll become an urban neighborhood. Clearly it'll become an urban neighborhood. So here's the phasing. We had great fun thinking about this thing. How would we actually do this? So we would build the next phase of it, following the same example that RTPL and Jim put out earlier. The liner building, the parking, take that down, but then create a new building possibility for it to be developed in the front. So it's a 1, 2, 3 proposal. As you can see, what's happening is just moving from right to left, leaving McCaffrey's, and the Alice is now complete, and the service parking for the Walgreens stays the same. And then over time, you complete it by adding again the same module again as it moves further to the left, and then you finally get to the final phase of this thing, which looks like this. Now, the thing that I find fascinating is that there are multiple places around the country that have done that. And it could be really a quite incredible urban neighborhood if it was done correctly. No doubt about that. But then the estimated program is, you know, there's a lot of housing and retail and parking and what have you, including McCaffrey's and what have you, and the parking spaces, and keep it at 3 and 4 and 5 stories and great streetscape improvements. But my caution on this one, that it's not eclipse the downtown. That's a real serious question, if it does not eclipse the downtown. Because the downtown has got to remain the core center heart of this town, and I think that's important. Catherine, we can stop here, or I can continue on.
We're at 10, what? We're at 10:30. So what do you think in terms of
Let
this?
me continue, if you guys don't
Okay.
mind, let me just continue,
we'll
and then
put a big
we'll
question
open
at
the
the
whole
end.
thing up at the end for a big
Yeah.
one. We're not gonna do 6.
Tony,
Yes.
I've got one question.
Oh, sorry.
I think it's clear to all of us that at Princeton Future meetings, you hear the most interesting discussions, the most forward-looking ideas, and it's a great experience to be here and to participate. The relation between Princeton Future and the town and its government has been, I think, somewhere between being ignored and occasionally hostile. I'm interested in the process. What we've seen is wonderful and as good as plans can possibly be. What is the process? Where do you see a way of getting anywhere close to what you're talking about?
That's a very, very, very interesting question. I think we've all been really saddened, I mean, quite honestly, depressed and saddened by all the work that's been done and all the input that people have given us. That's, for all practical purposes, been ignored by the planning board. A few people have attended, but their lawyers, who I really despise intensely, have not allowed anyone to participate from the planning board or from the steering committee to be able to participate. In fact, they're barred from even listening to any of this stuff, as far as I know, will not come or cannot come. So there's this thing in town about, we know, you know, they know, but we gotta keep this secret, because if you put this out, people are going to be upset, because the people anti-development are gonna be there. So everybody seems to be scared of everything. And we finally said, I think, what is the board? And said, listen, let's listen to what the people have to tell us, and let's just put it out there. If nothing else, perhaps we can embed it into, I think Catherine said it elegantly, into the psychology, the psyche of the people who are here and the people who are seeing this, without it actually being an idea. And I have no idea, because nobody has seen, I haven't seen the master plan, nobody that I know of has seen the master plan, or read it, or knows what's in it, and it's going to be approved in a couple of weeks. So here is, and they're doing a meeting at noon again today to get some more public input in it, which I find strange, being at the end of the process as opposed to the beginning of the process. But be that as it may, what we believe is what you see on the screen. This
Tony,
is what
can I just,
people have told us.
Justin Lesko, who's our planner, and Louise Wilson, who's chair of the planning board, and are here.
Mhm.
And I think
Quite
we might listen to what Justin has to say.
Thanks, Sheldon. Appreciate it. My name is Justin Lesko. I'm the planning director with the municipality. So as has been stated, we're pretty far along in our master plan process. I just want to clear some things up. I know in the past there's been instructions from attorneys for the planning board members not to attend these meetings. I think that was more particularly if they were seeing an application that was being discussed here. It's just kind of illegal, something not to do. That's not the case with the master plan process. Louise and I have been here, we were here at least for the kickoff meeting. We're here now. I've attended some of the things on when they're on Zoom. Saturday mornings just, aren't always easy to get to these. But many members of our steering committee that are seeing through the master plan have attended these meetings as well, whether it's Council President Sachs, Christine Symington from Princeton, Sustainable Princeton. But it's worked both ways too. So I've seen many of the folks here, as well as the members from Princeton Future at the events that we've had, the open houses, or filled out our surveys, or attended even these listening sessions that are occurring now to seek additional input that we haven't seen so far. We have a member of Princeton Future's board on our master plan steering committee. So she's certainly representing some of the thoughts here as well. And I think just generally speaking, what we're starting to see, and the documents haven't been released because we're still going through drafts, is a transformative plan that provides a basis for a lot of things, including many of the things that were mentioned here. So I think ultimately, when that plan does come out in mid-October and then is voted on by the planning board in mid-November, you will see a lot of your thoughts here or things that would potentially allow them. And please attend those planning board meetings when this document is up for adoption, as well as we have an open house this upcoming Wednesday at the municipal building. It's from 4 to 7. It's similar to the one that was in this room, where there's no formal presentation. You could drop in. And really, it's the first time that we're showing the big themes that we've collected back to everyone, rather than gaining input. So we're getting to the 8th or 9th inning and really beginning to wrap this up. So then, and to use Louise's phrase, our planning board chair, that is the end of the beginning, because then we get into the work to actually go from recommendation to ordinance to development, or to further study and things like that. So now is really the time that things can begin to happen. And just one last thing. So I do have a meeting at noon at Monument Hall. I don't want to steal people from this meeting. I'll try to delay that. I was under the impression this was going to be 9 to 11, so I scheduled that for 12, knowing I'd be here. So that's where the confusion reigns in that one.
Thank you, Tony.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I do remember seeing Louise here. I do remember seeing several council people who attended the transportation workshop. That's clear. That's clear. But even let's say Emma, who was on it, was very closed about saying anything. I mean, she just didn't. We had no idea. Quite honestly, she may be on the steering committee, maybe knew, maybe was translating some of the stuff that we had, but there was no feedback the other way. So, quite honestly, we didn't know. We didn't know. All right, let me go on. Sixth, it's interesting that the transit loop extended up to those medical facilities. There's a whole series of doctor's offices and what have you up at the upper end there. So it was interesting because it actually cut a valley, and the majority of people said no, extend it up to the medical facilities. That one, 7, we didn't do anything on 7. I can't show you anything on 7 right now, but 8 is an interesting one, right? Stop 8. Stop 8 was one that had, and you will easily recognize this one. This is Witherspoon Street and the Northern Gateway, the City Hall, the Board of Education facility. In the middle here is Franklin Avenue. Here is the Salt Dome. There is Clay Street housing, and you notice it literally got a red all the way down. It needs improvement along that whole edge. And they wanted it to be a green street, which, of course, there was a lot of ideas for that. And that has not happened, at least as of yet. Anyway, a big one here was focused on the municipal parking lot. That big one where they just installed these electric charging stations. And, you've all used it. I certainly have used it a lot. There's the potential section through that one, which means it could have some non-residential at the bottom, which could be civic, housing up above, and parking back that would not only accommodate the housing, but would also accommodate intercept parking coming into town. And then you immediately hop onto the golden loop. So here it is. There's the site, as you can see it in the base plan. And this is it's a simple U-shaped building, 60 feet wide, stepped, green roof, double loaded corridor, parking below, and 2 levels of parking at the bottom level. And it's that section that I showed you just a couple of seconds ago. So that's that one, and that's the program for it. But then it gets to be more interesting as you move across the street. This is a building that's been sitting there for a while, lots of controversy, but then it's wrapped around by beloved Conte's Pizza, and there's a fire station and what have you, all of which were designed around. Now, the Valley Road School building, I find that building absolutely fascinating. And there's been a certain amount of discussion on that particular building. And so here was the kind of the footprint, if you will. I'll make that slower if I can. There's the footprint, again, the standard kind of 60-foot wraparound that could or could not be as part of it. But what's fascinating about this one is that it is more or less the same concept with a couple of 3 kind of mid-rise, but I'll say mid-rise, maybe 6, maybe 7 story focal point buildings. But you can see what happens here is that not only would you have parking across the street, but you have parking on the back corner in the Conti's parking lot, if that got developed, again, surface parking. But one of the things that came up fairly strong on this one is people really like this building. And particularly, so the doodles start out with, what happens if we just save that whole front facade? Let's just save that whole front facade. And they, oh, no, it can't be done, it's too expensive, blah, 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 blah. I heard that over and again. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, you come from Europe and they save damn near everything, and they build around it. There's no reason why it couldn't be done here. And then you simply build on top of it and around it. And then you do something with Witherspoon Street, which means you actually paint the street to make it look like a plaza, and you connect both sides of the street together with a plaza that's painted on. So people going, what are we looking at? I'm slowing down because I'm not sure whether this is a street or if this is a plaza or whatever it is. So people slow down, and that's been given. And in fact, if you go to Lowe's, at Route 1, you see they paint it in front of the thing. Just paint it on. We believe that could be possible. Anyway, that turned out to be fairly interesting, and that's the program for that one. 9 is, and I'm only going to focus on one thing, not on the Franklin Avenue site, because that is, Chris has got that under construction, but the Salt Dome. Now, the Salt Dome has come 2 ways. One, it came out of the Witherspoon-Jackson visioning process, where it became the #2 ugliest place in town. The #1 ugly place in town was the fence that the municipality owns between on Paul Robeson Place, which the town owns that fence, but refuses to do anything about it. So you got the ugly fence that separates the town from the rest of those folks over there. And that is something that should be done. But the next one was this one. And by the way, Paul Robeson came up, it's pretty negative too, but thank God, both my contributions and lots of other contributions are really making that place change. But this is really ugly. I mean, this is really inappropriate. And they go to #2 voted ugliest building in that area. So there it is from the aerial perspective. And it's kind of interesting. And you want to leave the school parking, you don't want to take that away. So you just focus on that particular lot. But one of the key factors, that's what it looks like in the front, so there's no continuity there, even to get, if kids are walking from the neighborhood, they have to walk on the street to get to school. There's not even a sidewalk there. I mean, not even a sidewalk there. So again, the same notion of what works best, semi-public, let's plant a beautiful row of trees, let's raise it half level above grade, stoops and stairs with balconies in the front, and then, for those people who are, that you need to have a ground level access for ADA to be able to get to the other sets of apartments. So that's the aerial. That's the sketch. Again, it's a variation on a more traditional use with a tower on the corner, which occupies the corner and gives the corner some variation, and a little kind of plaza green space garden in the middle, so that everybody's got access to a small amount of green space in the middle. And again, I'm going to just bypass this. 10, 11 is right at the corner of Bayard and Nassau. It's the old municipal lot, which the Einstein alley, the Einstein Museum is proposing, and we have sketches for that. The parking lot behind Bank Street, and of course the seminary site, which I don't want to touch. I mean, we did sketches for it, but we're not going to touch that one. But this one turned out to be the most interesting, I think, of all of them. I think the one downtown, the shopping center, and this one, maybe the municipal company, but this one turned out to be, this one just was unexpected. When we did the susceptibility to change, you can notice the whole parking lot area around the train station all became red, but also the other side, about 100 feet into the golf course, became red. And the first thought was, ew, what would happen if we would develop along that whole golf course side? And then so I talked to some of the people from Princeton who are kind of friends, and they went, I mean, they were like flabbergasted. No way in God's name, are you ever going to develop our golf course? Okay. We'll stay away from the golf course, right? But what about the other side? Well, the other side, that's fine. That's fine. We'll just deal with the other side. So here's what's the thought. Not only do you have a train station that literally has nothing around it for all practical purposes, what people wanted was a more intensive transit center. And there's no doubt that in the notion of transit-oriented development, this could happen. Now, this one was a shock both to me and to and I think that probably will be a shock to you. But if you look at it now, this whole thing from there's the Lewis Center, there's the Wawa. This is all parking lot. This is all parking lot, and it's on a hill. So here was the first thought: what happens if you develop a series of mid-rise buildings overlooking the parking lot across that green space, right next to the train station, which would be incredible, and put all sorts of parking both below grade and what have you to accommodate the existing and intercept parking coming into the town. Well, that was a pretty good idea. And then went, well, what about this one? If you look at Deborah Burke's new campus, that's just got highlighted in several national magazines. What happens if you do the kind of the twisty thing that she did? But on the other hand, what happens if you build these buildings and then tie them all together to kind of make a coherent urban neighborhood with killer views over the golf course on one side and killer views of the university on the other side? I mean, it would be like right at the train station. It would be like numero uno fantastico, right? So then you look at it and say, okay, let's see what this thing might look like, right? So remember, it's up on the hill. So that's one of the great things about it already. And it's got a big parking lot in the back, so it's really nice. So this is what the first thought was of what these 4 buildings might look like. But what happens if we made them completely green? What happens if we made them completely green? Wind generators on the roof to really create something that would be really quite extraordinary. And then let's put all the parking below. Now, maybe it's just, and this was done well before Francoise and I spent our last 6 months in Europe. Every city that we have gone to Europe, you park underground. Period. Under the sidewalk, under the plaza, whatever, you park underground. And sometimes they're a little bit tight, but be that as it may, they tell you where to go, how many parking spaces are going to be there. You get the red and green lights, it tells you where the spaces are empty. They're painted and they have classical music in them. I mean, it makes parking a kind of a nice thing. As opposed to if we went now to the Chambers Street parking garage, it's asphalt, it's dirty, it's black, it's never been painted, there's no music, and it's pedestrian unfriendly. I mean, come on, there are ways to design parking structures which could happen. So here, the columns would be at the bottom of the columns, and ended up 540 parking spaces. You just set cars before they get in, will hop onto the little golden ring, and go any place in town you want instantaneously, right? Now, let's take it one step further. Why do we then need parallel parking along Alexander Street? What happens if we took the parallel parking off of Alexander Street and simply did a double row of trees to create a fantastic alley along that street and a bicycle path? Is that something that could happen? And of course, that's the service. Again, there's a big program for that one. Okay, now, I'll go through the end and then I'll just turn it over to Catherine and let her finish. The planning priorities here that you've seen today is the Emerald Necklace, which I think is really fantastic, no doubt about that. Zone T1, T2. Maintain a suburban auto-dependent land use and focus a susceptibility to change primarily in the kind of the downtown area. The Golden Circle. Focus to develop and propose transit stops. And of course, what I call the silver lining is that we provide all our affordable housing needs in a very reasonable and I think in a beautiful way. Now, the Emerald Necklace, as you know, no future development needs are necessary. If we focus around the train stations, which I think are perfectly possible to begin to do, and it's just indicated, the master plan is the one step, but the next one is actually to develop the zoning code to be able to do this, and we think that that's possible. And then, of course, the silver lining is, however you want to do this, with the need, the plans that you saw this morning, not including the ones that we didn't show you, have a total estimated need of 680 units. If it's low and moderate, we need to provide 3,400 new or rehabilitated units in the town to get our fair share of low and moderate market. Now, what happened is if you actually look at everything that was presented today, there's 3,800 units in just what we saw today. That's not including the ones that were not shown. So which means that not only can the town accommodate its low and moderate income housing need, it can also provide literally 2,500 additional market rate units that could be the missing middle, could be affordable housing for the people or teachers and fire people and what have you in the town itself. And so what it does, it says that putting all of this stuff together could actually provide what the town needs. Now, a lot of you are going to say, well, these are just a bunch of, pie in the sky dreams. How in the world are we going to get a transit system? Well, one of those thoughts was the university is running empty buses. Why not have the university? I mean, by the way, as you know, I have the greatest respect for the Princeton University. I mean, not only are they the #1 university in the United States, but I was just read a New York Times thing that for each person enrolled in that school, the endowment is almost $8 million. $8 million per kid. The question now starts to become, they're doing everything right. Building intercept parking facilities, going green, going sustainability. They're doing everything that I think is right, with the exception of they're building their own little kingdom. And I think it's time that somehow or another, and I think that could be done to the point of, rather than having those buses run empty for all practical purposes, have them populate the Golden Loop right away. Have them do that right away. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is that, the implement of any of the transit stops require overlay zoning, and that's what Justin referred to. I'm recommending that you do not hire some hack firm, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, that does a Euclidean zoning code or tries to amend the existing zoning code which is in place, because it is awful. It is awful, it is hard to work with, you have to go before the zoning board. I just think it just needs to be thrown out or used as the base underneath. What it needs is an overlay zone, and it should be, in my opinion, should be a form-based code which is illustrated and written and not just written. And I think the developers are required to provide off-site improvements. We can't do that because I can just do my site. I'll put 2 trees on my site, but I won't give you any more money for any more trees because I can't afford it or some bullshit like that. Which I think is really ridiculous, because I think there needs to be a series of off-site improvements. And essentially, if they do not accept those, then you go to the existing zoning. Leave the existing zoning in place. You want to go to the zoning board? You want to have Steve and the boys and the ladies deal with it? Then you go ahead and do that. And you spend a gazillion dollars on your lawyers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But do an overlay zoning that really starts to make some sense, and use it based on the transect system. I mean, it's being done all over the country. There's no reason why it can't be done. Absolutely no reason why it can't be done. So this is obviously #1, and hopefully Clark Caton and his has the capability of defining exactly where it is. The Golden Ring is easy with the stops. That could be focused in design on, we think. And then what I think is retaining most of the towns and suburbs, and then again combining the #1 university in the United States. And I think then you put it together, you really got what I call the jewels of Princeton. You've got something absolutely extraordinary in this town, which is already an extraordinary town. Just taking it one step further could really create something which would be world class. And so one of the things that's interesting, the university put this up, and I thought it was good. Are we better together? Well, of course we're better together. But my question is, are we? And I think the university already said it's developing its own mini city. It came out and said that. I call it the kingdom. It's a dictated kingdom. It's cool, right? But now is the opportunity for the town, somehow or another, to match what the university has put together. And it seems to me that what people have said to us and have looked at the goals, and this is, I think, Justin's directly copied out of your master plan or whatever we saw was the possibility. We meet or exceed every one of these goals. This plan meets and exceeds every one of these goals, with probably the basis for overlay zoning for each of the transit stops. That's not in there. And of course, what we don't know, of course, is that how much the master plan has dealt with susceptibility to change. Here we've got land that's already set. We know what people want and where people would like to see development occur, or something to occur. I don't know that because I've not seen the master plan, but I'm sure I will because I'll attend one of these other meetings. But what I think is really fascinating and just kind of conclusive is we wanted your opinion. That was what Princeton Future is all about. We wanted your opinion, and now what we get is we really value your opinion. That your opinion has turned out to be a really valuable input on the actual plan itself. So Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, well, we make some commitment to get you out on time, but we'd like to have you comment on, on this. I mean, Tony just gave us an excellent presentation, and we will have another session on November 18th, excuse me, where we might be able to deal with more content and more questions. But for today, what do you think? What do you think? Comment back here? I don't.
Hi, I'm Bill Moran, a resident of the Golden Circle since 1980. Born here, actually. Just a word of encouragement. I was here, can't remember how many years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, when they had the charrette in this room in the old library for this, what we see out here, and it happened. So,
And here it is, yes.
and it wasn't sure back then.
Great. He made a very good point. We talked about it years and years ago when Marvin Reed was mayor. And here it is, and we are all enjoying it, and isn't that wonderful? Yep. Okay, other points. How about,
Yep.
Who's good?
Just remember to talk into the mic, then it works better.
Thanks, Tony, that was great. There are a couple of bookends that I'd love to posit. One is kind of a question, the other is a request. The question, and it's a rhetorical one, is are we growing into a large town or a small city? This is kind of to your question about psyche. I've kind of thought of it as identity. And does that matter? Don't need an answer, but how does that impact everything that you just spoke about for an hour and a half? Number two is at the other end of it is that as critical as all of that imagining is, the rubber really hits the road when we start to get specific about plans. And I'm thinking about Jugtown, where I think there was a kerfuffle, an unnecessary one. Had those kind of specific locations been stress tested, much better. So we've got an overlay, an affordable housing overlay, and we've got a historic district that are coming right up against each other. And how that could have been laid out a little bit differently would have made a huge impact. So at the one hand, a very kind of basic question about our psyche and our identity, and then at the other end of it is stress testing these things, because that's really where everything grinds to a halt.
I'd like to start with a little bit of an answer to your first question. By the year 2080, the world will have 10 billion people. We now have about 8 billion. That's a lot more people. Now by 2035, we'll have a significant number more. And Tony made the point brilliantly at the beginning that change happens. It happens. One problem is we actually aren't having enough babies. we're kind of worried about the demographic problem of not being able to keep our society and our economy humming along with new people. But new people are coming. So to your point, change will happen. And to Tony's point, it's a question of how will we direct it. Now, to your second question, which was, again?
Stress testing.
Stress testing, the Jugtown example.
Which I recognize is not part of this particular conversation.
Right.
Just, again, they're bookends to the vision.
Tony, do you have any comments on that?
I'm sorry, both your questions are really excellent, though. But the thing that I think is important
is that both planners need to develop, and architects, who probably do much of this stuff, need to develop a kind of these conceptual ideas that start again with the doodles and can now move really easily into AI to be able to quote unquote stress test them, if you want to call it stress testing. And then, you know, they got the programs that say, how many square feet of this, how many sheetrock nails do you need? That's all out there now. So things can be stress tested, but they've got to be stress tested, in my opinion, first with a vision of what the area wants to be, and B, then developing what I call really simple three-dimensional models of what it could be. And now we can do several variations of what three-dimensional things could actually be. And I think that's really needed and necessary, and it cannot be just, I mean, again, the number of planners, and you know, Jim is sitting in the back and certainly could testify to that. There's so many planners who just have no capability of three-dimensionality. They just don't. They just don't have that in their head. And I think it's very important, if they don't, then that the zoning code requires that you do this process before you submit any application. You don't come in with a completed application. You come in with a three-dimensional, four-dimensional plan to get preliminary approval before you begin to move through the whole process. So you need staff in order to do that. And you know, I don't know if Justin can handle all of that, but there definitely needs to be done. But the more important question is, what are we becoming? I think Princeton is becoming one of the more unique hybrids, probably in the United States. It has the potential. Number one, because it's got the #1 university. Clearly. Number two, it's got people who really want to preserve the edges and the green. Extraordinary. It's like English planning. But number three, the key is that in order to make a place really sustainable, it's got to be walkable. In order to walkable, you got to have places to walk to. You have to have things you want to buy. You have to be able to get around. Your kids need to go to school. So the little microcosm in the middle will become something special. Now, maybe I'm a little bit prejudiced on this because I just spent 6 months living in a 1,000-year-old medieval town, which hasn't changed in 800 years. It just keeps growing, and people keep adapting, and they keep adapting, and they keep adapting, and keep adapting. But what's really cool about it is the pedestrianism. What's cool about it is the fact that there's a market. What's cool about it is that people know each other. Now, I don't know if this is a town or a city. I don't know what this is, but it's a place where really interesting people are, where really smart people are, and also where it's really, really, really interactive. So I would tend to think that it is a small suburban town with a very big university that is in the process of growing. And I think it's not going to grow negative. It's only going to, if this was implemented, half of this was implemented, it'd be one of the most unique college towns in the United States, in my opinion. So I don't know what that is, but I think it's really a super hybrid, cool, interesting town.
If we take Tony's point, visualize first, and then think about it, plan about it, and then make it happen. Okay, another, whoop, microphone is coming.
Dan Rappaport on Princeton Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I have 2 questions for either Andrew or Tony. For your proposal about the emerald necklace, would there be linkage to the Delaware and American Canal towpath in Kingston and the necklace in Lawrence and Hopewell, the Lawrence Hopewell Trail? And the second question is, a few years ago I heard a proposal from Tim Quinn about making the part of that would be Province Line Road that you can't use for anything now into a hiking and biking trail in honor of the 250th anniversary of the United States. Is anyone supporting his efforts to try to do anything with that? Because I haven't heard anything since I've heard about it initially.
That's new to me. One of the things that
I
happened.
can answer one part
Yes,
of that
Henry?
for you. One of the nature trails that I've been building recently, or in the past actually, was a connection down Stony Brook that connects directly up with the Hopewell side of things, and it comes down Stony Brook behind Edel Farm community, and then eventually there is a walk path where we can connect with the rest of the Stony Brook Trail that goes all the way over to 206 behind Hunt School. And those are trails that I built maybe a decade or more ago. And that will connect very easily. It's quite possible to make a serious connection there.
At an earlier meeting, we had a father and daughter who talked about doing the complete walk. There are a few little glitches in the complete walk at the moment, but it is almost there. So to your point, thank you for building those trails. Other questions?
Just one response to that. We had thought that we just didn't have time to do it. We had thought that after the 6th meeting that talked about the Emerald Necklace and all these people got up and talked, that, and maybe Justin already has it, I don't know, but there should be a very specific green map of this town.
Yes.
Very specific green map that then, and we even pushed it one step further. Now, Francoise, my wife, she's the biggest walker that I know. I mean, she's doing the 10 miles a day kind of stuff, and so she probably knows it as certainly better than I do, because I'm not that athletic as she is. But be that as it may, we had said what we would like to do is prepare a map that has all green spaces in town, but also including sidewalks, which means, can we create a kind of a lace drawing that would include all sidewalks? Because I think that the area between the sidewalk and a curb, I call it the parkway. I mean, not the Garden State Parkway, but the parkway, right? It has trees on it. So what does the tree plan look like for the town if we connected all the sidewalks together with all of the green spaces in town? What would that map look like? And how would people begin to use that map? So that's one of the things that has been on our back list. But again, we work for nothing. I mean, that was something that I kind of hope that the town would do, or Clark Caton and Hintz would do, to be able to put that whole thing together. Is it possible? Absolutely. And I think it would be a very cool map when it was done. But then it would be, I mean, I think there's 10 years of green signs down on the street I just saw. I mean, the town there's new trees on our street, what have you. So I think connecting it all together would be just a fantastic thing, because it would make the town healthier, it would make it more sustainable, we would plant more trees, and people would be healthier.
Tony, we also need more bicycle paths. Just, you haven't mentioned it too much.
Yeah.
Candy?
Kathy Knight, Jugtown resident. I want to thank you so much for this presentation. I really drunk the Kool-Aid in all these proposed developments, like they were just absolutely awesome. I just wanted to point out, though, that I was surprised that one of your goals doesn't include preserving some of the historical aspects of neighborhoods of Princeton. Because in your developments, you used, in general, underutilized areas, back parking lots. I was so into it, but I think it's really important that when we do allow development, we make sure we preserve our historic districts, and I just think that should be included as one of the goals, in my opinion.
This afternoon.
Awesome. That's great. And I agree with what Tom Pinio said about the Jugtown area. If you notice, the Harrison Street, Nassau is one of the transport areas, and right now, transit centers, and right now, with the new overlay, the new construction can all be 0 setbacks, and that is just won't work for that intersection. It's just a real problem there, and I just wanted to bring that up because it's come up many times. It's just, that's kind of a glitch in how the development's going, and really won't work for that area. I wanted to follow it up with just a quick question. I was just curious what the thought was for the percentage of affordable, the 20-80%. I was just curious. I know the Franklin Avenue development will be 50-50, and I'm just wondering if the Princeton Future people have thought about it and if they support the 20-80 for the inclusive development ratio or not. Thank you.
Tony, do you want to speak to that?
The 20-80 is normal. That's the number that can work from a development perspective and what have you. Now the Franklin Avenue one was different because the town owned the land. So if the land has to be acquired in some form or another, it's a very different thing. So any places, for instance, somebody said the salt lot, or the one that's, could be one that could be 50-50. That could be 50-50. There's others that where the town owns land could be 50-50. But a majority, in order to make developers, provide the housing, the formula has been for years 20% is low and moderate, and 80% is market rate. That seems to work. Now, it's a very tough thing. If there was some way to subsidize it, like one of the big donors would subsidize it, it's possible to have a greater amount of affordable housing. But in most cases, for instance, when we're thinking about a half-level underground parking, we're going to get screamed at because it's going to be expensive, you can't do that. And of course, the great test is going to be what emerges from the Franklin Avenue site. That's going to be the big test. I mean, two tests I can see coming up. What's going to happen at the Franklin Avenue site? What's that going to look like and feel like? And where's the parking going to go? And the other is, the big test is Chambers Street, to see whether or not that's going to, because if Chambers Street goes with the parking on it, all is lost, in my opinion. But that's just me. I'm just negatively thinking about it. If the town can't step up to do that, then, where does it go? But anyway, it's just a test. We'll see what happens if it goes one way or the other. But I think the 20, although Sheldon and I disagree with this a lot, I think it's really difficult to think about doing 50-50 unless A, the land is owned by the town, or B, that it is subsidized in some form or another in order to be able to make that happen.
Thank you.
Well, that last point is very important, particularly on the Jugtown site, where the town does own a lot of that land and could be closer to a 50-50 development.
Or if we didn't have to put in as much parking, we could put in more units than we could. So there you go. It's a way to nudge towards.
By the way, sorry, I got to keep. The thing that's interesting about the transit system, and if we built the transit system, we could reduce the parking on every site by half. By half. And say, hey, listen, if an underground parking space costs $30,000 a piece, and you only have to build half of them, what do you do with the other 30,000? Well, you help subsidize the transit system. Or else, God bless it, if the university would run the transit system, you imagine what that could be? We could immediately reduce the total amount of parking in every one of these sites by half. By half. And that would be a godsend, not only to the development community, but keep the traffic off the street, et cetera, et cetera. But then people hop on the little bus and it just flips around town and it does what it needs to do. Anyway, that's a very important point.
Gentleman here against the wall in the white shirt.
Hi, my name is Danny Tenenbaum. I actually just recently moved here for a graduate program at the university. I'm originally from Montana, where I served in the state legislature, and I wrote a bunch of land use legislation with my colleagues there. And it was really interesting to see the sort of the state of affairs here in Princeton. I like being here in Princeton. We've only been here for a few months, my wife and my kids. But it does feel very much like a wealthy enclave, and I'm seeing evidence like all around town, just how the people who basically run the city tend to migrate in from Trenton, New Brunswick, more affordable areas, and then they go back home at night. And to me, that just seems extremely unsustainable and a black mark on the town that it functions that way. And I think one of the slides showed, the number of units that Princeton has to provide under its fair share requirement, which I think was a result of litigation, and they're continuing to fight, or they have fought it in the past. I think the vacancy rate here in Princeton is 1 or 2%, and to me, we can talk about design, and this is where housing should go, and this is where housing probably shouldn't go, but unless there's a plan to produce enough housing to really increase the vacancy rate to something healthier, more sustainable, like 5, ideally something like 8%, it's going to continue to be a wealthy enclave that's really just not a place where young families can move to, where middle-class people can live and contribute to the city. And so there were a few slides that said, we're going to focus on downtown, we're going to leave large swaths of the city for suburbia, and to me, I don't think that can be sustained. I think you gotta do more than just allow ADUs in some of these neighborhoods that are currently very suburban. And the way we did it at the state level in Montana was that we just saw these conversations happening in the wealthy cities and towns of Montana, Whitefish, Bozeman, Missoula, and they were just never getting anywhere. People were debating things, people were proposing things, a lot of fancy graphs and master plans were being proposed, but nothing was actually happening on the ground in terms of updated zoning. And so we just said at the state legislature, bipartisan, it was almost unanimous, every single lot in a city where you can currently build a single family house, you have to also allow for basically 2 more units of housing, either a triplex or a duplex with an ADU, just legal by right. And we got a ton of blowback, but basically only from cities. Everyone else was like, this makes perfect sense. So we went beyond, we legalized mixed use throughout all commercial areas. We did a whole bunch of other stuff. My sense is, watching this presentation, if I were in the New Jersey State Legislature, and there's a guy in my program who is, I would just begin starting the conversation about state preemption, because it seems like the conversation is just going way too slowly and going development by development, all these battles happening, this is how many parking spaces are needed. I know that's a not popular thing among certain groups, but there's a whole bunch of people who would love to live in Princeton, but who are not in this room and who can't provide input, and there's just no room for them in this community. And to me, that's a huge failure.
Number one, we really need to hear your voice. Very helpful comments, and please come to other meetings and let's talk about this, because many of us, when we think about Montana, we think about Yellowstone and the fact that he doesn't want any development anywhere near his property. But as you say, you have hopefully a more enlightened legislature that is working on it. Rich, I'm remembering when you did a program a couple programs ago, you talked about the affordable housing number was something like $800,000 in Princeton. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I think the average household income was $160,000. And if you took a very, very dedicated buyer, a person who would stretch their budget to the ultimate, that person could afford maybe a $900,000 house, and there are none on the market. And to the point that Mr. Tannenbaum made, absolutely. We've been sitting here thinking, oh, are we going too fast? Are we going too fast? All this housing, oh no, we're not going fast enough. I would second your opinion.
Right, thank you, Rich.
Just one quick point. I'm living here in Princeton making less than $20,000 a year. And I'm currently building you probably the nicest park over in Herringtown Woods. I encourage you all to check it out. And the nature trails for the Emerald Triangle. And work with a lot of various environmental groups here in town. I thought I was going to be homeless. I rent, my landlady said, oh, time to go, a couple months ago. And there's just no options. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to a different state or moving somewhere. I couldn't find anything down here. So the importance, really, what I'm saying here is that if you like the idea of having people who build your Emerald Triangles, who will take care of your parks, your green spaces, that's people like me. And, nobody pays us very much money. Just enough. 90% of my income goes to rent. Yeah. And that doesn't leave a whole lot else. That's why I go out and spend all my time in the woods. It doesn't cost anything out there. But that's a real factor and such. I think Princeton, I think to your point, yeah, really housing here, affordable housing is, and access to it is just so important if you guys want to continue to have, the kind of town you have here. It requires some people like me.
Thank you for your testimony. Other comments?
So hi, I'm Valerie Haynes. For years I've been a volunteer with Princeton Community Housing, which is a nonprofit that builds affordable housing in Princeton. And it's been doing it for over 50 years. It's really hard. Everything everybody has said. I'll just put in a couple things. One, we do have a 50% affordable 50% market rate development in Princeton. It's called Briggs Farm. It was developed by Princeton Community Housing with assistance from the municipality, which was repaid over time. Is it not? Okay, like that, sorry. And it's thriving today. It's still thriving today. So there are half of the affordable units are for sale units that the town manages, and half are rental units that we own and manage. So that does exist, but you know, we haven't done another one like that. We just added 25 units at Princeton Community Village, again, with some assistance from the town. Of course, we own the land already. That made it more possible. We were able to, you know, refinance mortgage and do other things so we could raise the funds to do it. And that's running up right now. But it's very slow, it's very incremental, and it could be so much better. In addition, I take issue with the 20% number because we really need a lot more than 20%. Moderate income, people who are eligible for subsidized housing as moderate income are people who make 40% of the median, right? So that's... No,
what's the number, Valerie?
I couldn't possibly tell you the numbers because they vary so much depending on the size of the household and all the other things. And they change periodically. They are adjusted, obviously. But you know, that's more than 20%. So, and we don't have that now. We don't have 20%. We have about 10% of our population in income restricted units in Princeton, which is good for a suburb, but it's not good enough.
Right.
So exactly, you know, exactly to your point. I live near some of those undeveloped preserved lands, and I would love to see trails that I could actually walk to, but that's not happening. We just keep acquiring more land. So, you know, I guess those are the main points I want to make at this moment, but, you know,
There's work to be done.
There's a lot of work to be done, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. Any other points?
I'll make a comment.
Okay,
Danny,
sure.
welcome to town. What are you studying?
I'm in the public policy school.
Okay. Well, we need your help in this town. I'm a believer in 50-50 housing. We did it. We persuaded people on Franklin because the land was free. The reason, the largest reason that the land is so expensive in the town of Princeton, and we, in the year 2000, 60% of the teachers in our public schools lived in the borough or the township. Now that number is 0. And if you're talking about human ecology, which is what you're talking about in my view, this town needs to remain a town. That's the pressure. And I think we could do it with 50-50 housing. It's going to take knocking down the land cost in this town. And it's probably going to take a lot of money. I think we have a neighbor that could help us with that if we presented a town-wide proposal to be considered. Maybe you can help.
And in case you don't know, Sheldon Sturgis, who just spoke, is the founder of Princeton Future. Yes.
To follow up on that, I'm Linda Oppenheim. I'm also a member of Not in Our Town Princeton, which is an anti-racism organization. I think it's important to point out that Butler Tract is owned by the university, so they're the ones who are going to be doing the development. And someone who just left the School for Public and International Affairs, Matt Malechko, had proposed for the university to make that a land bank so that the land itself would not increase in cost and would allow affordable housing to be continued in perpetuity.
Oh, thank you.
Is that what
Good. Comment here, the lady?
I just have one quick question to follow up. Basically, I'm also affiliated with Princeton Community Housing. Has any consideration been given in the plans that were prepared for this wonderful presentation to the municipally owned land?
To the municipally owned land?
Yes, there are municipally owned sites.
Like the
that-
Salt Dome?
Yes.
Fire station.
Fire station, salt dome.
Yes.
Parking lot, there's like 4 or 5.
A quick follow-up, I did see some variation in the 80-20 formula. How did you arrive at that? Because you went quickly over those
We didn't
slides.
really talk about that, did we, John?
No, I just,
80-20.
it's the normal state number that
Right.
has been used.
I thought I saw
The
one.
court
that
likes
was-
that number.
I thought I saw one that was 45. I could have
No,
been mistaken.
sorry.
It was very quick, thank you.
Okay.
But thank you very much for the presentation.
And the gentleman?
Just to follow up on some of the earlier comments, or the later comments actually, I do think we need to do like Minneapolis and like a lot of other towns in Montana has done, to allow development on all parcels in Princeton, not reserve things for single family homes. I think that, it might not go to, maybe duplexes, triplexes would be great. We need more of that. But we really do need to try to develop, as Sheldon said and other people, this 50-50 thing to the extent we can. And yet with municipally owned lands and with the, I'm going to backtrack slightly. In terms of the Emerald Necklace, it's a great idea. I use all those parks, I love all those parks. I think we need to get them connected, we've got to preserve them. But I'm not sure that we should protect all green space in Princeton right now, as long as we have adequate green space, because we might need some, if it's municipally owned, if it can help for affordable housing, we might need a little bit of that for the housing, while still keeping the vast majority green. We need to use every way we can to provide for, at this point, not only a working class that I mentioned, but a middle class in Princeton. And at this point, there's a shrinking middle class in the market rates. That we used to have market rates in the 100,000, 200, 300,000 range. As somebody said, the minimum now is almost 800.
Yeah.
The median is what, 1.2 million or something? I don't know, but anyway, it's ridiculous. And so we do need to try to do this. And yes, it will grow the size of Princeton, but to the extent we can do more 50-50, and maybe even more 100%. I like the 50-50 best, but maybe some more 100% to try to do that, and then figure out something for the missing middle. Thank you.
One of the things I'd like to remind you of is Princeton Future talks about participatory democracy. It's hard to say. It's hard to do, too. It means you have to show up. It means you go to meetings. It means you talk to the people who have the power to make change. It means you vote. And that's how change really happens. And one of the things that we're hoping to do with sessions like this is to give you the background you need to ask good questions, to make recommendations, and to show up. So that's important. Question up here.
Hi guys, I'm Sam Bunting, and it's more of a comment than a question. I apologize I came in late because I had to do taxis to ballet and things like that, swimming classes this morning. So I don't know exactly what you've said, but we do have a master plan rewrite going on right now. And very importantly, there is a major public open house on Wednesday of this week, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Town Hall at 400 Witherspoon Street. And if you like some of these great ideas and some of the great ideas which we've heard from Tony and in the room, you all need to come and stress to our planners and the consultants that these ideas need to go in the master plan. So just to follow up on your point about participatory democracy, the planners need to hear that you are excited about these ideas, because there is a point of view that nobody in Princeton wants any more apartment buildings. That point of view has been expressed. There is a point of view, coming back to your point about single-family housing, that we need to preserve single-family housing in the greatest extent of Princeton. And these points of view are informing the current master plan rewrite. And if you have some alternative ideas, such as those which Tony was talking about, please come and make sure that the planners and consultants are aware that you support those kinds of ideas. So that's happening this Wednesday 4 to 7 p.m. at the town hall, 400 Weatherspoon Street. I'm bringing this up because I've been involved on the advisory committee for this master plan rewrite process. I don't know to what extent the full range of perspectives in Princeton have really gone into it, but I would hope that some of the people in this room would come out on Wednesday and make sure that those points are reinforced.
Thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time. Tony, we can't thank you enough for this wonderful work that you've done and the wonderful presentation. So thank you. There will be a next meeting on November 18th, and we may take up a few more of these issues. And you may want to take what you learned today to the municipal master plan meeting that's taking place over at Monument Hall, at noon. So you've got 25 minutes to walk over and it isn't pouring. Again, thank you so much for coming out and have a wonderful but probably wet weekend. Thank you.